Welcome in, everybody, to MLB Hot Stove Daily. I'm your host, Michael. Really appreciate you guys joining us on a Wednesday evening. A lot of things going to be happening around baseball over the next couple of weeks. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe on the video. Join us here at the Upside Sports Network. Follow us over on X, at UpsideSN, and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Tonight we're going to be discussing quite a few things. First and foremost, we went through all 30 clubs to see who is a contender and who is not. You guys can check out our previous lives to discuss all of those different scenarios. We also made a trade for each one of those clubs at the deadline, at least the contenders anyway. Tonight we're going to continue our series that we started on at the end of last week, where we discussed the perfect trade deadline for both the Seattle Mariners at the end of last week, and we had the Houston Astros last night. We're going to attack three different AL East contenders this week, or tonight anyway, with the Texas Rangers, the New York Yankees, and the Baltimore Orioles. Now, they start off a key series this week. Baltimore and Texas do in Texas. That will be key to determining which direction Texas decides to go here at the deadline. Chris Young, the GM of the Texas Rangers, told Joel Sherman of the New York Post today that he expects the Rangers to be buyers. Now, depending on how they come out of the break, of course, remains to be seen as to whether or not they ultimately should or will be buyers. If they continue the streak that they've been on, 9-4 over their last 13, they beat the Houston Astros 2 out of 3 on the road, but going into the break, seems like they're getting healthy as well. Things are starting to turn around in Texas. Keep an eye on the Texas Rangers in that AL West. Same thing for the Baltimore Orioles in the AL East. There was 4 teams that were contenders anyway. 3 contenders, 4 teams total that really had losing records going into the break over the last week or so. White Sox, of course, not a contender, but the Yankees and Orioles found themselves with sub-500 records heading into the All-Star break. They would like to turn that around rather quickly. Now, the Orioles, I think it's just the middle of the season. There's no cause for alarm for either one of the clubs. But I would be looking for some reinforcements primarily in that pitching staff. I would look to add at least one more front-end starting pitcher. You look at all the arms that are now on the injured list, not just for the Astros or the Rangers in the AL West, but the Orioles have lost a number of players off of their roster due to injury for the remainder of the season. They need to replace those innings that they're losing from those guys being out of the rotation or out of that bullpen. Bautista hasn't been there all year, of course. They had to bring in Kimbrel. There's other things that they can do to address that, but for me, I would like to see them go out there and add a starter, but they're going to have to be aggressive here at the deadline to do so, with so few teams deciding to sell this year. So the last team we're going to discuss here is the New York Yankees. What a great start they got off to this year. Juan Soto seems to be fitting perfectly in New York. We'll save the Juan Soto discussion, whether he stays in New York, for after the season. But for right now, what is it going to take to complete this great season for the New York Yankees? It's going to take getting to the World Series and winning it to get Aaron Boone the legitimacy that he deserves as manager of the New York Yankees. Now, what are they going to have to do to get it done? In my mind, they have to add a corner infield bat, whether that be a first baseman or a third baseman. They need to add somebody who can give them stability at that spot. The other thing I would look for, I know they brought in Trent Grisham. I know they brought in Alex Verdugo as kind of outfielders around Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. If there is one more athletic bat that they can bring in, I would try to do that as well. The biggest focus for me outside of that corner infield position, though, has got to be pitching. You look at that starting staff, they've gotten some great contributions out of guys that coming into the year we weren't expecting that much out of. Garrett Cole didn't pitch for a significant portion of the year already, and what a great start they got from Luis Gil, among other starting pitchers. Now, they need to kind of lengthen out some of that rotation. They can't continue to ride those guys every 5 days. They need to bring in, pardon me, fly going around me. But they really need to bring in some reinforcements to eat up some of the innings to take the pressure off of Garrett Cole, as he's still kind of getting used to being back in the rotation. He missed about a month and change anyway earlier this year. You want to be able to get those young guys to be fresh in September and October. You don't want the dog days of summer to really grind them down to a pulp before they even get to the postseason. That's where things really are going to matter for the Yankees. They're about winning championship banners, raising the trophy, getting the big ring, rather than just, hey, we made the wild card, everybody, round of applause. That's not going to save Brian Cashman's job. We came into the year saying Brian Cashman had to make the postseason and had to make it convincingly enough to get to at least the American League Championship Series, and at least for me, for him to be able to retain his job there. He's been great for the New York Yankees, but the method really seems to have stalled out up until this year. Juan Soto trade looks great so far, but it's going to be about how they finish the year as to whether or not these trades, the moves that Cashman's made, ultimately pay off. So those are the three teams we're going to be discussing today. If you guys want to check out our series anyway on all the other contenders around Major League Baseball, check out our previous videos. We'll continue our series tomorrow anyway with the AL Central teams, the Guardians and Twins. So be sure to join us for that one. We'll finish the week up anyway going over the NL East anyway. And really appreciate those of you who stuck with us throughout this entire series. And if you guys haven't hit that button already, please do so. Hit that like and subscribe. Notice we gained a few subscribers overnight. Really appreciate that. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alrighty, so tonight we're going to discuss the three teams, the Orioles, the Yankees, and the Texas Rangers. I'm going to save the Rangers for last. I know I'm Texas-based, and you guys know I'm a Rangers fan. I got quite a few Rangers fans that are a part of my group here, but we're going to hold those guys till last. Let's focus first on the Bronx Bombers. We're talking about the New York Yankees. We want to see what they're going to do here at the deadline. What's a perfect trade deadline for the New York Yankees going to look like? First and foremost, like I mentioned off the top, they need a corner infield bat. I would look for them to try to add somebody like a Ryan McMahon, somebody who has multiple position flexibility that they can play at third, second, or first, possibly DH if they have some other guys that they want to play at those spots. But he would be a great fit, kind of a Swiss Army knife for them to bring in. Other pieces they could look at. Starting pitcher. They could look towards some top-end starters that are out there like Garrett Crochet. I don't think they'll be in the market for him, but they could look to him. They could look at Eric Fetty, kind of that next step down, starting pitchers who are performing well this year. Jack Flaherty comes to mind as well. They could look towards the Tampa Bay Rays. They've been connected with them over the years on numerous trade ideas. Zach Eflin would be the target there. Maybe a Yandy Diaz could fit the first base spot, or even better for them, Isaac Paredes could fit their third base spot for them. Now, would the Rays give up 3 years of control anyway for Paredes to go to the New York Yankees, an in-division rival? Remains to be seen, but the Rays seem to be willing to make a trade with just about anybody as long as they know they're getting their pieces they want out of whatever trade they want to do. That's why teams are always leery about trading with the Rays, is because they always seem to win every single trade they're a part of. So buyer beware if you try to go after Paredes, Diaz, Eflin, Fairbanks, Springs, among others. There's going to be a number of starting pitchers available from the Rays this year. There's going to be a number of position players available. The bullpen, they've already started to churn as well with Phil Maton going to the Mets. Rays could be one team that could shape the could shape the AL World Series picture. Welcome in, Bruce. Could you please say if the Orioles offer Jackson Holliday for Mason to the A's, if you think the A's would accept the trade? I think they would be I think they would absolutely accept that trade. I do not believe that the Orioles would offer that trade in a million years. We're talking about a relief pitcher versus somebody who could be an MVP level player for you. I don't care how good Mason Miller is or how much he might impact your winning this year. He's never going to impact it the way Jackson Holliday would. And as much as as much value as Mason Miller has right now, he doesn't have Jackson Holliday value. I'll put it this way: even just 1-for-1, that trade is not happening. Now, as far as what Mason Miller would be worth, he's probably the best swing and miss stuff right now in the majors out of the bullpen. You worry about the issues with injuries anyway that he has in the past. It's also a short-term track record of success that he has. You saw how dominant he was in the All-Star game as well. 2 strikeouts in his lone inning of work. Mason Miller really put on an exhibition for teams that were interested in trading for him at the All-Star game. He looked every bit as dominant that he could have hoped for. The other issue for Mason Miller is that he's got 5 years of control left with those injury issues and with the small sample size. It's going to be curious to see if some team is going to pony up the value that the A's put on him, whereas the value that other teams might put on him that they might try to acquire him. Now, as far as Holiday goes, Holiday's just too much of a piece. I get that the Orioles could really use a pitcher like Mason Miller, but there's no way Holiday would ever enter the chat as far as being an option. Now, if you're talking about a Mason Miller level piece that's a starting pitcher, then we might change the conversation a little bit. But we're talking about a reliever here, and so the value really doesn't sync up for that to happen. Phil, you're right about Holiday being too good to trade for Mason Miller, but I read on the chat board that Orioles may do it, and I feel it would be dumb. Absolutely, it'd be dumb. Like I said, Jackson Holiday has the potential to be a perennial MVP level player. Mason Miller, in his best daydreams, is never going to be that. There's only been a couple of relievers who've gotten really close to being, Cy Young type of pitchers. Very few have ever even entered the chat for the MVP race. And Mason Miller, as much as he might impact the race this year, the race next year, the race after that, the race after that, and the race after that, he's never going to affect every single game the way a guy like Jackson Holiday would. Now, I'm not saying you can't get a couple of top 100 guys, but Jackson Holiday is just way too lofty of a target. I would look more towards a middle, say around a 30, 40, 50, 60 guy, somewhere in that range for MLB top 100, and then you're looking somebody at the back half of that, and then kind of rounding out the package. We're not talking about a top 10 in the sport prospect like a Jackson Holiday is. He is that good of a player. I think his future is just that bright for the Orioles. They did a great job drafting and developing talent, position player talent specifically. They struggled for years to get those starting pitchers to work. Only recently have some of them started to catch on. But now with the injury issues in their rotation, they need to add some starting pitching. Mason Miller, I think, would be a great luxury for them to acquire here, shorten the game. That was kind of the idea of what they brought in Craig Kimbrell for, to help shorten this thing down. That's why they were trying to bring in a guy like Josh Hader this offseason as well. Same kind of idea applies here. But now that they've lost so many innings out of that starting rotation and out of the long relief role out of their bullpen, they need to add some frontline starting pitching. You're looking at Corbin Burnes taking the ball in Game 1 for the Orioles. Who's going to take the ball in Game 2, Game 3, and possibly Game 4 if you get that far into the postseason? That's where I have questions still about the Baltimore Orioles. Love their lineup. I think they could tweak it a little bit here and there. But the biggest impact that they could make on their roster is in that starting pitching spot. We'll get to the Orioles in just a minute, but let's finish up our discussion here on what the Yankees need to do to get their perfect trade deadline and end of season. What would be the perfect trade deadline for them? We're going to go over to baseballtradevalues.com. Great site if you guys want to check out what's going on over there. We're going to go over here to the trade boards and just see what's happening over here. We're going to go to the Yankees and just see what you guys are posting real quick. Just see if anything sparks here. Do you feel Mason Miller could easily blow out his elbow because he throws the ball so hard all the time? He does have injury issues in his past. Wouldn't surprise me, but you can't really count on a guy getting injured or not. I feel DeGrom and Scherzer will make Texas into a champion again. If they both stay healthy, I believe they are a great 1-2. I'm not sure right now that there's a better 1-2-3 in the sport that is better when healthy than DeGrom, Scherzer, and Eovaldi. Those three, I think, probably win 9 out of 10 playoff series that they're in when they're healthy. If they're struggling going into the postseason with their health, for instance, Scherzer, if he's having blister issues and something major. It was some type of a strain here that he had that was not common to pitchers, at least anyway. If they don't have those types of issues nagging them going into the postseason, that's probably the best 1-2-3 in the sport as far as starting pitching. Now, the Dodgers could have something to say about that once they get Yamamoto back, once they get Ohtani back next year. But for this year, that's probably the best 1-2-3 if all three are healthy. and that's still a big if with DeGrom. We're not sure when we're going to get him back, but it sounds like by all reports we're looking end of August. I would guess around the end or beginning of September anyway, when September call-ups happen, he would be the one that comes up just so they can take all the time they need to so they don't have to rush him back. There's no way the Rangers, with the investment that they have in him, are going to rush him back when he's not ready. DeGrom, when he's not just right, when he's not 100% healthy, everything seems to go off the rails real quick for him. So the Rangers are going to be very patient with him. Tyler Mahle as well, a great number 4. Right now he's unhittable in the minors. Before he had the injury with the Twins last year, he looked like he was back to his old self as well from the Cincinnati Reds. He's a great number 2 in a rotation. Right now he slots in as a 4 in the Texas Rangers rotation. All right, let's get back over to our discussion about the Yankees here. Paredes was the one we just mentioned. Look at this package here. Spencer Jones being the guy, the big piece here. Arias, the supplemental piece, and a couple of other pieces to round it out. I think that price is a little high. I'm not sure you're able to pry away Spencer Jones in that deal. Paredes again, Tanner Scott. Makes some sense so far. Rays, Spencer Jones, we'll see. Again, Spencer Jones. Volpe, that's never happening. Doval, that would be a great trade. I don't think the Giants move him. Let's see here. Alex Wood, Mason Miller. This would be a good depth move for the Yankees here. If they did get a guy like Mason Miller to the back end of their bullpen, you bring in Wood, you bring in Stripling to kind of lengthen out the rotation to eat some innings for you. That's not a bad trade. I kind of like that idea. I think it's a little weak as far as a return for the A's. There's no reason for them to make this move, trading away Mason Miller when they're not getting a top 100 guy in exchange for him. I would argue they could get 2 top 100 guys for Mason Miller because of how much value he has left and how much control he has left on his contract. You're not moving Hader's deal, and there's no way the Astros are taking that deal. Eovaldi, if the Rangers sell, maybe. Rangers don't do that for that return, though. Cortez out, Garrett in, no. Heaney going to the Yankees. That might actually happen even if the Rangers decide to buy at the deadline. Rangers are going to have a little bit of a roster crunch. I've been proposing for weeks now that Michael Lorenzen could be the guy that's on the way out. They seem to really have a soft spot for Andrew Heaney. They love his quote-unquote stuff that he brings to a major league rotation. Guys that would be on the way out, or guys that would be shifted to long relief. Guys like Dane Dunning, who have strong performance, strong track record as a starter, but they don't necessarily trust the stuff when it comes to October baseball. We saw that with Dane Dunning last year in the postseason. They didn't really use him at all as a starting pitcher. In fact, they barely utilized him at all in their entire postseason run. Meanwhile, the entire second half of the year, he was their best starting pitcher outside of Max Scherzer when he was healthy. So Dane Dunning gets a lot of disrespect on his name. He'd be a great number 3 on some of these younger teams, looking at you, Pittsburgh Pirates, looking at you, Cincinnati Reds, looking at you, Detroit Tigers. All those teams could use a guy like Dane Dunning in their starting rotation, or teams that are just starting to enter a rebuild. They need somebody to soak up some innings. Toronto Blue Jays, if they decide to trade some of their starters, he might be a fit there. But looking at the Yankees specifically, Andrew Heaney, I think, would be a great fit as a number 4 or 5 in that rotation normally. And then if you feel like, hey, your rotation's great, you'd rather go with the 5 you have now. Heaney's thrown out of the bullpen before, and he's thrown effectively out of the bullpen in a postseason series before. So you could easily put him back there as a long reliever for you guys. Say Garrett Cole gets rocked in 3 innings, he gives up 5 runs and 8 hits and 2 walks, and he's just at 100 pitches already, and he's got nothing left in the tank. You go to Andrew Heaney, different type of arm, goes in there, settles things down, and lets the Yankees at least stay in the ball game until their bats come into life. I feel the Orioles or Yankees should try to get Tarek Skubal. Here's the thing with Skubal. The ask for him sounds like it's 2 to 3 future all-star level major league players. We're not talking about prospects that could become that. We're talking about prospects that are so highly valued that if they don't make all-star level status at the major league level, that they're considered a bust in the eye of the team that has them currently. That's how highly the Tigers are putting the price on Tarek Skubal right now. There's a very few teams out there that could even present a package that would fit that. I just think the ask right now from the Tigers is so astronomical from what teams could actually part with in a trade. For instance, Texas Rangers, I know them so well. if they decided to go after a Tarek Skubal, what would it cost? You're talking about Wyatt Langford being probably the primary piece there. You're talking about Evan Carter being in there as well. You're probably talking about Jack Leiter with a diminished status that he has. You're probably talking about Evan White as well, again diminished status, and then you're going to possibly one of their younger players in the system. I don't think they wouldn't have to put Sebastian Walcott in this, but if they decided, hey, I'm the Tigers, I want Langford, I want Carter, I want Walcott, all three of them for Tarek Skubal, they could ask for it. That's their prerogative. I mean, he is their pitcher right now on their roster. Now, fair or not, if you believe Tarek Skubal's value is that high, great. I don't think it is, and I don't think any team on the planet thinks it is either. I think we're probably talking about 2 top 100 guys, maybe a couple borderline top 100 guys just to round out the package. I would look at a trade similar to what the Rangers did for Cole Hamels years ago. Would be very comparable to what the trade could look like for Tarek Skubal in realistic terms. In fantasy land, where the Tigers are right now, there's no way Tarek Skubal is getting traded, especially when he has a chance to win the American League Cy Young this year. He is the bright spot on their team right now. That Javi Baez contract is an absolute albatross. If they found a way to offload that deal and still get a Cole Hamels type package in return for Tarek Skubal, I think that would be the one way they could lower their price a little bit on Skubal. I don't think there's any team that's willing to take on the money of Baez, and I don't think there's a team that's willing to take on the money and the prospect package of a Cole Hamels level package to get that trade done. So we'll go ahead and cross that one off the list as well. Bo Bichette, another target here. In-division rival. I don't think you're parting with your best player, your future, if you're the Blue Jays, to the Yankees. Bo Bichette there. I don't see that happening. Vlad Guerrero makes some sense as a first base option as well. We'll do one more page here just to see if anything else catches our eye. Luis Robert as an outfielder. Garrett Crochet. Crochet makes a lot of sense here. We'll get into that one here in just a moment. Crochet, Jimenez, Rogers, Bellinger, Chapman, Rogers, Rengifo, Ward, Skubal. There's no way that's happening. Diaz, nothing really there catching the eye. Rengifo, Estevez, smaller level trades. None of these are putting them over the top. All right, let's go ahead and get to our trade here. What would the perfect trade deadline look like for the New York Yankees? We'll put the Yankees in here first. Second team we're going to go ahead and put in here is let's do I'm thinking Rays or White Sox here. Rays because of the package of Paredes and Eflin. Looking at the White Sox, it'd be all about Garrett Crochet there. I don't think anybody else really has the pieces that would make a game-changing type of move here for the Yankees. Cubs could have a couple of pieces, but I don't think there's really anything on the Cubs that's going to move of significance this trade deadline. Blue Jays make some sense, but again, in division. A's make some sense because of Mason Miller. Okay, let's go with the A's. We've talked a lot about Mason Miller. We're going to go ahead and pull him up real quick. The biggest value for the A's right now, so they are going to want to maximize what they get in return for him. Now, if you're the Yankees, Mason Miller's a great get, but you still have a hole in that rotation. You need somebody to come in there and eat some innings. So where do you go? I would look towards the bottom of this roster here. Wood makes some sense. Stripling makes some sense. Stripling's been a little bit better if I remember correctly. Let's go ahead and pull him up. Let's look up the Oakland A's pitching stats. I know we all were curious about that coming into the day. How good is the Oakland A's pitching staff? Said nobody. Ever. All right. Let's see here. Let's go with games started. Sears has some decent value, 4.5 ERA. Stripling 5.8, ouch. 5.2 for Alex Wood. We're not expecting them to take the ball every fifth day and compete in the postseason, but we are looking for somebody who can eat some innings. Wood has only pitched 39 innings. Stripling has only thrown 55. Welcome in Sub-Zero. Starter, bullpen, and third base. I agree on all of that. It's just a matter of what you're going to be able to do here at the deadline. I think third base is very gettable. I think a starting pitcher is very gettable. We're going to focus here, though, on the bullpen, getting probably the best relief arm that could be moved in Mason Miller. Let's look at their innings pitch totals and just see who jumps out. Probably Stripling. Blackburn's thrown 4.11 ERA. What's his status right now? He's on a rehab assignment. I don't know. None of those guys are really moving the needle for me. Let's go back over to our trade here. Again, the big get for the Yankees would be Mason Miller. Let's just kind of start with a package there, and we could throw in another starter if we want to. What kind of package would it take to entice the A's to part with Mason Miller? I don't think they'd be able to part with a guy like Spencer Jones or Jason Dominguez, but then you're looking at that next level of prospect. Arias, Lombard makes some sense. Young guys, shortstops. Hampton as a starting pitcher makes some sense. Maya makes some sense. There's not a lot of guys with a whole lot of value at the top end of the market that they could move outside of Jones or Dominguez. And I don't think they would part with either one of them in this type of a move. I think if you're giving up Dominguez or Jones, I'm right there with you, Sub-Zero. I think it would cost too much. But let's just say they throw in Lombard and Arias. Just for kicks and giggles. I want to look at the Yankees top 100 as well. And just see where their package is at. All right, Arias is an A-ball. Henry Lelane makes some sense because he's younger. This A's team is not ready to compete, and they won't be ready to compete for a couple of years. We're going to go ahead and put Lelane in this package as well. And that's three decent pieces. None of them, I think, move the needle enough for the A's to be able to make this move. I mean, look at this trade. 55 value for 30, and we've already included 3 of the top 6 for the Yankees. We're not including Spencer Jones or Jason Dominguez. I just don't think there's a path here. I'm with you, Sub-Zero. I just don't think there's a path for Mason Miller. Same thing could be said for anybody else, like a Garrett Crochet who's similarly valued. You're going to have to take a little bit of a step down here as far as total value, depending on what you're bringing in. If you're bringing in, say, a position player that has some long contract or has some long contract or control left on his deal, then we could talk. So, for instance, Paredes would be the only one that really springs to mind from the Rays that would make it worth giving up Spencer Jones for. I think you hold on to the Martian and Jason Dominguez. He seems to be the next great Yankees outfielder if he hits, which is still a big if. But it doesn't look like there's a path here for the Yankees to acquire Mason Miller. So let's go to our next target here. We talked about the White Sox. Garrett Crochet, similarly valued, also not going to be able to be afforded. But let's look at his value just for a moment here. That way you guys can see where it's at. 2 years left to control after this year. That's probably the only reason why this trade possibly could work if they were willing to give up Jones in this type of a package. Even if they did, I'm not sure it would be enough to convince the White Sox to part with him. I would expect them to want at least 2 premium pitching prospects back in return, and the Yankees really don't have that to give right now. So let's move on to the next team. We talked about the Rays being in an in-division rival. What could they give up? Well, there's Paredes, 50 value, and we haven't even included Eflin in this deal. You're going to have to include Jones here. That would possibly make it work, but then you still have to include another starting pitcher here, and I just don't think it's there either. So I just don't see a match here, at least this year, between the two. There's not much left out there as far as sellers. You look at a team like the Angels, that would probably be your best case scenario because they have a lot of different pieces that could plug a bunch of different holes for you. Rengifo could be your third base, first base, shortstop, second baseman, corner outfielder. They have Ward, who could be an outfielder for you. They have some relievers and Carlos Estevez and a bunch of other older relievers. Matt Moore comes to mind that they could plug in there as seventh, eighth inning guys. You look at the starting pitching that the A's have, or that the Angels have. Tyler Anderson, probably the best of the bunch, made it to the All-Star team this year. But they also have guys like Sandoval, Canning, among others that could be moved. So the Angels could be a nice fit for the Yankees to kind of keep the cost down for the prospects that they'd have to give up. We'll go ahead and move on. Let's look at the Blue Jays. Blue Jays, another in-division rival here. Vlad Guerrero Jr. would be the target here. I'm not sure he fits between the two. I think he fits the third base, first base need, but I don't think that there's really any incentive for the Blue Jays to take the Yankees offer versus having him go literally anywhere outside of the division and still get a very comparable, or if not a better package from another team. I just don't see a fit there either. Like I said, not too many teams are sellers. The Cubs are going to be one. Giants should be one, but I think they're going to stand pat or at least add or trim around the periphery of their team. I don't think there's any landmark change going. We'll go to the Miami Marlins. Now, the trade we made earlier this trade deadline season was for Jake Burger, and that's where I'm going here. That's the piece that interests me. If I'm looking at this team, what could they go out there and get? Jesus Luzardo makes some sense. Let's look at the Marlins pitching staff and see where they are at. Looking at innings right now, Rogers leads them in innings pitched at 95, Luzardo in third at 66. He has a 5 ERA though, 2 years left to control. He's a better pitcher than that 5 ERA suggests. 1.25 whip, average around 246 this year. Been bitten a little bit by the long ball, giving up 9 so far, 22 walks, 58 strikeouts. 3-6 on the year, but again, it's the Marlins. Weathers is not going to move off of this team. Looking at the bullpen, Tanner Scott, of course, would be the big get here. Let's go back over to our trade board. Rogers, 2 years left to control, 14 value. Jake Burger, 4 years of control left. Kind of fits their home run power type player that the archetype that they usually go for. And look at the value here, 7.9. That's very palatable for the Yankees to be able to part with the prospect as necessary to bring him in, and still leave them some room to be able to add around the periphery of this team. Say they want to bring in another starter. Cost for Luzardo might be a little rich because that 2 years left on the deal. I think the Marlins are going to expect a little bit more than what he's worth this year. But the Marlins would be right to do so. 2 years left to control for a major league level starting pitcher is nothing to sneeze at. A 5 ERA, though, is something you might want to steer clear of if you're the Yankees. But if you're just looking for somebody to mop up some innings, he could be the guy for them. We'll go ahead and look at the bullpen here. Tanner Scott's really the piece we want to look at. Let me get that one pulled up for you guys. Now, this trade would solve 2 of the 3 biggest needs for the Yankees and relatively low cost. Looking at what they would already be giving up, 13.1 is what the quote-unquote value is for Burger and Scott. I would go ahead and add 2 or 3 to that. I think Scott's value is a little bit higher as well as Burger. But you're not going to be able to get this full package here from the Yankees for him. So looking at Lane, that makes some sense for them to keep the starting pitcher pipeline coming. I do expect the Marlins to try to offload some of their starting pitching either at the deadline this year or in the offseason. They're going to have a couple of starters coming back. Lane could be used to kind of replenish their starting pitching pipeline. Now, as far as a key piece of this trade, I would look towards possibly Lombard or Arias, one of those two. We'll go ahead and stick with, we're just going to pick one. Let's go with the lower valued of the two in Lombard, and it's only because it's lower valued on here. Yankees could save a little bit of money here that as well, just kind of equal out this trade. But I kind of like where this one is at. Trying to look and see who's at the lower end of this market. Nobody really springs to mind here. So we're going to include $3 million cash to the Yankees. There we go. Value's fairly equal. You'd like to get a little bit better return if you're the Marlins. I'm not sure the Marlins do this one, primarily because I think if they just trade Scott on their own, they could get a very comparable package back as far as total talent. I think Lombard just has a little bit better value than what they could acquire. So while I like this trade for the Yankees, do I think this trade has any hope of passing? I do not. But this would be the dream scenario for them to be able to get kind of a 2-for-1 here out of the Marlins in Berger and Scott. So what would we have to do to get this trade across the finish line? Well, let's go ahead and take out Lombard. Let's go ahead and take out Scott and the cash. Yankees have to include a lower level piece. Let's say they include salvage a little too high a value. Let's say they include Marte, 20-year-old starter. They get a couple of starters for Berger, DH, third baseman type. They continue their starting pitching pipeline and really utilize what they've been best at so far is developing starting pitching to acquire hitting. Here they're getting rid of a hitter who doesn't make sense on this team right now because they aren't a very good team, and being able to replenish their pipeline. They're going to have to replace him in the offseason, but I think they could get a comparable replacement while this really solves an issue for the Yankees. Let's go ahead and validate this trade. Post it to the site. Remember, the Yankees like to trade in bulk rather than top-end talent, so this trade kind of satisfies that trend for the Yankees as well. So there's trade number one, bringing in Jake Berger, flexes second, third, first DH, and solves their corner infield hole that they have on their roster. Let's look at starting pitcher. And for this one I am going to the White Sox. This one I'm getting Eric Fetty, sending him to the Yankees. Has a year left to control, and has really demonstrated the ability to handle the major leagues better than he ever has at any point in his career up until now. Value right now has gone up since they've updated their site. It's now up to 20. That's significant value, and that's because of how good he has been. The question is, can he maintain that success in the second half and into the postseason? Now, if you're bringing in an Eric Fetty, you're not expecting him to take the ball in game 1, 2, or 3 for a postseason series, at least on the New York Yankees. You're hoping for him to give you some solid innings, reduce the wear and tear on some of the younger arms in your rotation, as well as some of the other arms that have been coming off of injury. And so he would solve a lot of the depth concerns that I have about the Yankees rotation. Looking at the Yankees, what could they give up? Well, for me, this package has to begin with one of those young shortstops here. White Sox haven't done too much as far as position players, as far as the trade targets that they've acquired, outside of strengthening their catching position. So we'll go ahead and start with Lombard, since he's the lower value of the two. Pretty much that's the only reason here, and it gives them the flexibility to go out there and add another one, another top-end piece here, in a guy like Maya. 18-year-old outfielder, 8 value. Looking at the prospect chart here for the Yanks, he slots in there at number 9. With Lombard in there at number 6. And we haven't even traded one of their top 5 prospects out of this so far to bring in Jake Berger and now to bring in Eric Fetty, solving 2 of the 3 big holes on that Yankees roster. Let's look at the trade and just see where the value's at. 20 to 20.9. I actually really like the trade for both. 2 really good young players going to the White Sox in exchange for a player that they literally just signed from international ball, who's shown the propensity to be able to handle major leagues a little bit better this time around, but it's still a relative unknown as to what you're going to get down the stretch. So it's a bit of a gamble. You're giving up some young talent, and again, quantity over quality here. They're not giving up the Dominguez, the Jones, the Arias. They're giving up Lombard and Maya. They haven't touched their top 5 prospects. Let's go ahead and put that one through, validate. Last trade we're going to do is for a reliever. They could go closer, they could go setup guy, they could go middle relief. There's a lot of different directions that they could go. For me, though, let's go ahead and get the Yankees pulled up here. Angels make a lot of sense because of Estevez, but they also make a lot of sense because of the middle inning relievers that they do have. Let's look at their relief pitchers on the Major League roster. All right, Estevez probably being the best of that group right now, 2.3 value. He does bring in some closing experience, obviously. Some of the older guys that are still on their roster, Garcia makes some sense. Looking at, where's Matt Moore? -3 value for him. Fulmer has shown the ability to play both out of the rotation or play at least a multi-inning role out of the bullpen, or until recently just started his first game of his career as well. He has some decent value, to me at least, out of this Angels bullpen. I think he'd be a good swingman type of player here that could get you in some of those blowout games, get you to save the innings on some of the better pieces in that bullpen, and just kind of keep the wheel churning here, if you will. But Estevez would be the primary piece I would be looking to acquire. Garcia, kind of a short, how do I put this? Only available for probably an inning or two at a time, but he's never going to be a multi-inning reliever at this point in his career at 37. Matt Moore isn't going to be that either. I think Carson Fulmer really fills that void for them, and it's not going to cost them pretty much anything at all. You look at this trade here, 2.3. Yankees can handle that one in their sleep, and again, they don't even have to touch their top 10 in their prospect system to be able to get this one done. We're going to even go on to page 2. We're going to probably do 2 prospects here for the Angels to wish and dream upon. We'll do Omar Gonzalez, 19-year-old starter. And then we'll do a younger or a less valuable piece here. We'll go to page 3 for that one. Fidel Montero, a 19-year-old outfielder. A couple players that they can wish and dream upon, low A-ball players. Validate the trade. Fair trade. So the trade, just in case you're wondering, Estevez, Fulmer. 2 decent bullpen arms. Estevez, a good reliever, high-end leverage arm anyway in the bullpen. Hard to tell with Angels baseball as far as how much pressure he faces in those situations, how he'll react going into October baseball. But giving up a couple of A-level arm or giving up a couple of A-level pieces for them might hurt them in 3 or 4 years from now, but they are really good as far as replenishing their farm system with some of the best international free agents out there. They are the New York Yankees. They have that name brand. They have the great wherewithal to be able to build from within better than most teams out there. Dodgers have that same luxury as well. We validated the trade. We're going to post this one to the trade board. And then we're going to look at this perfect trade deadline for the New York Yankees. All right. Go away. We're going to go to my account. Actually, let's do trade boards. I wonder if all 3 of my trades are right on top. Come on. Don't freeze on me now. There we go. Okay. Go away. Go away. Ads are everywhere. Okay. So looking at this trade, well, let me pull it up here. Good Lord. Gotta love ads, my friends. Alright, so there's the 3 trades we just made. Berger, Fedde, Estevez, and Fulmer. You solve your bullpen, Estevez and Fulmer. You solve your starting rotation concerns, Fedde. You solve your third base, first base, DH type of issues with Jake Berger. What does it cost you? Your number 6, your number 9, a couple of other low-level prospects as well. You're going to have to replenish that, but that's far more replenishable rather than giving up a Jason Dominguez or a Spencer Jones. What do you guys think of this trade deadline? For me, this plugs a lot of holes for them. It does not solve the frontline starting pitcher need if they decided to go that route. It doesn't solve the aircraft carrier at third base need if they decide to go that route. There is options to do so. I just think the cost is far too prohibitive for them to be able to trade away a Dominguez or Jones, for them to bring in a guy like Paredes or Garrett Crochet or anybody of that ilk. They're going to have to go that next tier down. Mason Miller, I think, is a little bit too high of a reach for them as well. Really like all three of these deals. This, to me, would be what I would be hoping for if I'm a New York Yankees fan. Of course, I want to see the better pieces come in. I want to see the Crochets. I want to see the Paredes. I want to see the name player coming to my team. It's what the Yankees have been known for since I was a kid. But it's a different brand of baseball now, and getting multiple different pieces that solve your issues. Think of what the Atlanta Braves did, bringing in all those outfielders when Acuna went down and among a couple of the other outfielders went down. That year they won the World Series. They went and piecemealed it together, and they did a great job doing so. These players are all a little bit better than the pieces they brought in. Jake Berger is going to be on that roster for 4 years after this one. He's going to solve that spot for them for the next 2 or 3 years until they decide to go in another direction. Estevez solves their bullpen needs immediately. Fetty solves their rotation needs not just this year, but next year as well, and buys them some time with those young arms in the rotation as well. Let us know in the comments section what you think of the perfect trade deadline for the Yankees. And let's move on to the Orioles. Now, Orioles, as we mentioned, need pitching. They need pitching, and they need even more pitching. Let's go ahead and pull them up, see what y'all are proposing. To me, they need a number 2 or a number 3. Somebody who can take a start in a postseason series. Corbin Burns, great get. They solved that issue. I thought Dylan Cease would have been the next piece that they should have acquired. They didn't do it. Padres got that deal done instead. Are they going to be able to go after a Tarek Skubal? Sure, but I don't think they would be able, in their right mind at least, be able to bring him in without really mortgaging their future for what Crochet would cost, or for what a Skubal would cost. Crochet is probably the best piece that they might be able to get here at the deadline without truly having to give up their best pieces. So let's look at what some people are saying out there. Skubal here makes some sense, like we said, but again, cost. Fetty, Kopech, pretty much everybody from the White Sox. I don't think that'll happen. Skubal, like you just talked about, not going to happen. Anderson makes some sense. He would probably take the ball in Game 3 for them at the moment. Just to kind of show you guys what the trade market would have to be for Skubal. Your starting point for Skubal would begin with Jackson Holliday, and it still wouldn't be enough. That's why he's not getting moved. And there's no way the Orioles are moving Jackson Holliday, even if it would have been close. Go ahead and scrap that one off the table. Fetty, Skubal, a lot of Fettys and Skubals here. Michael Lorenzen makes some sense, low-cost option. Luzardo, 5 ERA though. Mason Miller to shorten the game, sure. We talked about this one being a possibility if they were to trade Skubal for a Hamels type package in return. The only way I see them doing it is if a team took on that Javi Baez deal, and that ain't going to be close. You ain't going to include $42 million, that's for sure. Happ makes some sense as far as an offensive piece. Steele makes some sense as a starter, but the Cubs need to keep him. There's no way they're moving on from Justin Steele. Scherzer, if the Rangers decide to sell, makes a lot of sense. I would agree there. He said he's not waiving his no trade clause though, so don't expect a Max Scherzer trade this year. Seeing a lot of guys hoping for guys like Logan Webb or Tarek Skubal. I'm just not sure there's that trade out there. Paul Skeens, there's no way his value right now is 73. He's got to be closer to 100 at this point, just because of how young he is and how dominant he has been. But there's no way you're prying him out of there. Anderson again. Skubal again. Gallen, not happening. Doval, Crochet, Fetty, Canning. None of these pieces are really moving the needle that much for me. I do think we'll get some surprise trades here, but I just don't see anything that really makes any sense for any of the teams yet. We might have to go off the board here. I just don't see anything from anybody that anybody's proposing that makes some sense. Crochet is probably the only one. There's been a lot of dialogue between the two teams. Let's just try to build a trade real quick here, what the perfect trade deadline would look like for the Orioles. Orioles will be the one team, White Sox will be the trade partner here, and we're going Crochet for the primary piece going to the Orioles. He could take the ball for the next, he could probably take it in game 3 right now, and he'd be in their starting rotation for the next 2 years after this. Really solves a big need for them in the rotation. What would it cost? Well, you go over to the Orioles, you're not giving up a guy like Jackson Holliday. You're not giving up Henderson. You're not giving up Rutschman. I would argue you're not giving up Westberg as well. Basayo, I think, could be a piece that's moved for a true ace like a Skobal if somebody were like that to become on the market at the trade deadline. Other than that, I think he's untouchable. Mayo probably is the one piece that you could move that's at the upper end of the availability here. And that's primarily because he's a first base type of prospect for them. They really don't have anybody to fill that first base spot for them unless they put Rutschman over there when they bring up Basayo. That could be another way they decide to go for it. But I think that the White Sox would want something as far as pitchers in the way of a return for Crochet rather than Mayo anyway. Cowser I don't think would be on the move here. Povich makes some sense as a prospect here because he's got 5 years left of control. They really don't have too much as far as starting pitching prospects that they could even move here. I just don't see a match here between the two teams. What other starting pitcher could start a Game 2 or a Game 3 in a postseason series for them? We talked about Tyler Anderson. He's probably the most gettable arm out there. Cubs might have an arm or two available. Rays we've talked about with Eflin. The Flaherty experiment last year with the did not work. I don't think they want to revisit that one. I just want to look at the Washington Nationals and just see what they might do here. Jake Irvin, 3.49 ERA. Corbin, of course, still there. Trevor Williams could make some sense. Floro has been discussed as a trade target. Let's just see what a guy like Trevor Williams would cost from the Nationals. Just out of curiosity here. I'm not sure he would even start a Game 2 or a Game 3 in a postseason series, but there's not that many impact pieces out there on the market. There he is. 1.8 value. He's an expiring contract. Let's look at his numbers again just to see where we're at. 56 innings. What's his health like? He's on the IL. I don't think he's an option for you either, and I don't think he would be somebody who starts Game 2 or 3 anyway in a postseason series. There's not that many starting pitchers that are out there for the Orioles. Let's go ahead and look at the Rays. We're going to look at their starting pitchers. We're going to look at the ones on the Major League roster. We've done a few trades now for Zach Eflin. He seems to be like the one that's closest to going out the door. One, because of the money, and because he's going to be an expiring deal next year. The one other pitcher that's been mentioned a few times is Jeffrey Springs. And this could be a way that they kind of reposition themselves as far as their prospect base. They could move Springs. They could move Eflin. I doubt they would move both in the same deal, and this is going to be in the division. We've done a few trades for Eflin. Let's see what we could do for Springs here. We're going to trade Jeffrey Springs to the Orioles. He could be a guy that starts game 3 for the Orioles in a postseason series. Now, what would it cost? It's his value right now, 15.6. Let's look at his or what he's done so far this year. Looking at the Tampa Bay Rays. Innings pitched, Zach Eflin is up there at 3.99 ERA with 99 innings. Savali's already been moved. We're going to pull him up. And then we're going to go to Springs. Not on there. Rays. And Springs. All right, 31-year-old, 3.4 last year, still hasn't pitched yet this year. You look at the injuries here, or look at the innings pitched anyway. Had 1 year where he was a starter anyway for a portion of the season, pitched 135 innings. The year after that, he comes back, misses the remainder of the season last year. Only pitched in 3 games, 0.5 ERA though. He has some value and could be a legitimate, number 2 or 3 for you in a legitimate rotation. But you have a huge issue with the injuries. That's why his value is as low as it is. Let's look at where his injury status is as well. Let me update this real quick. We're going to go down to the Tampa Bay Rays. Oop, there they are. Springs is on the 60-day IL. Just threw 4 2/3 as a bullpen at AAA Durham, giving up 5 runs, 4 were earned, 8 hits and 1 walk. Looks like he's still rusty. And there's not a lot of time to really guarantee what kind of production you're going to be getting. I'm not sure this is a great trade target either for the Orioles, but there's not a whole lot of options out there. Let's take Eflin out. And what we're going to do, instead of doing it by, we're going to do it by all teams. We're going to go by innings pitched. And we're just going to see where we can find an opportunity. We've done a Barrios trade before with the LA Dodgers. He would make some sense here, but it is a little bit of a bandbox. A 4 ERA, but 119 innings. He's posted very well. Low whip. The home runs are the bugaboo for him. I mean, look at all the other leaders here. 17's the high. He's at 21. Very similar innings anyway to Corbin Burnes, but you look at the ERA for Burnes versus Barrios, and you can see the clear disparity there. Tyler Anderson probably would be the... We might have to go with Tyler Anderson here. I just don't see anybody that really moves the needle enough for the Orioles as far as a starter. Michaelis, but his ERA is around a 5. Gosman, ERA 4.5. Canning, 4.8. Yuck. Cal Quantrill, 4.1. Okay. We're not trading for Patrick Corbin. Obviously, 5.5 ERA is actually down from what he's been in the past. Then you get guys like Bassett. That would actually make some decent sense here. 107 innings, 19 starts, 3.5 ERA, low home run total. In a hitter-friendly ballpark, that could work. He likes playing in the AL, or he likes playing in the Northeast, I should say. I like the idea of Bassett. So we found one. We found one option. One. There's so few starters on the market this year that could make a legitimate impact. Bassett coming in and stabilizing their rotation from an innings perspective and being able to take the ball in Game 3 might just be what the doctor ordered. So let's see what we could do here. Is an in-division trade. So that does worry you as well. Looking at what he's done though, 3.5 ERA. His numbers might be a little bit fortunate though. His whip is 1.43, so buyer beware. Alright, how many years does he have left on his deal as well? We'll go with the years left first. Kikuchi's an expiring. Bassett has a year left after this one. Gausman has 2 left. Barrios has 4 left after this year. Okay. If you're the Blue Jays and you really want to maximize the value you get from Bassett or Barrios, I'm just going to do something just to kind of play with something, so don't mind me real quick. Just kind of watch the screen and just see what we do. I just want to see what it would even look like. Something like that. Value currently -45 roughly. Looking at roughly 13 million left on the contract this year, 13 million, 26 this year. So you'd be looking, what, $40 million in payroll commitment next year. You're looking at another 40, 45 million. And then let's look at the relievers. Surplus, there's not much there. Not a whole lot of value on this team, so you're going to have to use your money if you're the Blue Jays to try to create some value when you are a clear seller this year. Okay, so let's say they get crazy. Let's say they do something completely out of what they've done in the past. I'm toying between $40 and $60 million to be attached to this trade. Basically paying for the remaining salaries this year of those 2 players they would be acquiring and for the majority of their salary the following year. It's an in-division rival, so you'd basically be buying prospects from them. Let's say they do 50. Split the difference. Going to the Orioles. Add cash. Value is only a 4.5, so you're not going to be able to get a whole heck of a lot, even with that money in there. Going over to the Orioles side of things, they've been great at drafting and developing. We're looking in the minors only. We want to sort by age, just so we can kind of maximize our value here. Looks like they have a couple of these guys in here twice, but we'll try to avoid that. Okay. Looking at the value here, you're not going to get Basayo, Mayo, McDermott, Bradfield, Beavers, Fabian, Horvath. Johnson's probably the biggest piece you could get. I don't think they would want to do that anyway. I think they'd rather go the youth route here. They need a shortstop of the future if Bichette leaves eventually. Check. They need some starting pitching in there on the major league level coming back, possibly the other direction. This could be a chance for them to eat some money coming back as well. Let's see if there's any bad money invested in the Orioles team. Not a whole heck of a lot. They could free up some by bringing in James McCann. Not a whole lot there, though. Means could be a pitcher going out. Really don't have a lot that they could move off of, so they've actually done really well by managing their assets. What we've got in here so far, 2.5. They have roughly 2 and change to play with. 17-year-old shortstop in Sanchez. I'm going to go ahead and do him instead of Arias. Arias is closer, though. They might go both. If they did that, lower level piece here that could solve some of the issues for the Orioles. Garcia out of the bullpen might make some sense. Okay. And that buys them a little bit of room here to go all the way down. We're going to go to like page 4 here. Throw in a young third base prospect, and I want a starting pitching prospect. Rivera. Is there like a really young pitching prospect somewhere? Let's go to page 1. Cruz is the other one. Okay. So you're giving up 3 pieces, and you're giving up $50 million in cash if you're the Blue Jays. You're getting off of 2 starters in your rotation. You immediately open up 2 spots in that rotation. And you're trading within the division. Barrios is then going to be facing you for the next 4 years. Bassett for 1. Garcia is going to be off the team by the next year. For the Orioles, does this do enough to be considered a perfect trade deadline? For me, this does give them significant innings that they do not have currently in that starting rotation. So from that aspect of it, I love it. There's not too many starting pitchers that are out there. They could try to go out there and get a Garrett Crochet. If they did that, they'd have to give up Hurstead, and I just don't think they have the starting pitching prospects to be able to get it done. They would probably have to work it into a 3-team deal with possibly the starting pitching prospects coming from another club. Could that happen? Absolutely. But for a straight 2-team trade, I like this one because it gives them innings and 2 guys who are at least giving them some production. A 4 ERA for Barrios with 21 home runs. Yikes. Bassett, though, 8 home runs, 3.5 ERA, but the underlying numbers don't look quite as good as the surface numbers. You're giving up 5 very low-level prospects, and you're basically not having to pay either one of those pitchers. Bassett, you're almost not having to pay entirely for that deal, and Barrios, you're not having to pay him for this year and the majority of next year, and then you don't have to. Then you're basically having him on your books for 3 years after that. It solves your innings issue is the biggest talking point for this one for me. Does this constitute them solidifying themselves as a World Series contender or even a favorite in the American League? I'm not ready to say that yet. I would say this is still a pretty good trade, but I think there might be better opportunities. Says it's a fair trade. We're going to post it. I'm going to go ahead and do one more trade as a 3-teamer to show you guys what a Garrett Crochet trade might look like. I think the best case scenario would be them getting a guy like Garrett Crochet. So let's go ahead and just try it. I want to see what a three-teamer would look like for them. All right. We're doing the Orioles. Whoops. White Sox. And who has some starting pitching that they could trade from to be able to get something in. Now remember, they're going to have to take on whatever the Orioles don't give to the White Sox. So it's probably going to be a team that has some starting pitching that they could move via trade, but they want some position player prospects. So it's almost a prospect for prospect type of trade for whichever team they go to. Who has the starting pitchers? Possibly the Dodgers. They're the team with probably the most currency. Rangers would be up there as far as starting pitchers in the minors. Not necessarily the higher level ones, but they are there nonetheless. Let's look at the top 10 right-handed pitchers. Hence for the Cardinals, Mayer, Scott, Thorpe. Let's look at the lefties. Quinn Matthews, another Cardinal. I don't know about that though. Ferris, high A ball, 20 years old. Giants with Wisenhunt. Blue Jays with Tiedemann. And about that one. Okay. Let's go back over to our trade here. We know what we're getting from the White Sox. Let's go ahead and put the Dodgers in here as the third team for now. White Sox, we're giving up Garrett Crochet. Now, the other thing to consider is the Dodgers, they want some starting pitching as well. Why would they allow another team that they're bidding against to be able to get the player they're targeting? We'll get into that in just a minute. Okay. He goes to the Orioles. They have some decent talent coming on the starting pitching side, but none of it's really hit yet. But I think they're going to want at least one starting pitching prospect back of some decent value. Let's just see what this trade would start to look like. Let's start with the Orioles side of things. You're not giving up Basayo. Mayo, we've already talked about. Kowser's not going to go anywhere. Hurstead probably is the best position player that they could possibly get right now. That might be your first piece. Povich possibly could be your second piece. Bradfield could be a third. Then you get into the Beavers, Fabians of the world. Okay. So we're going to start this package with Hurstead as the primary piece. We're going to go to hitting. We're going to look at the Orioles. He's played in 21 games, a .314 average. Hasn't shown too much yet. They have Hayes out there in left. They have Kowser that they played out there in left. Hurstead's hit a little bit better. Kowser's played 88 games versus Hurstead's 21. I do think Kowser's going to get it going, though. 12 home runs for him. 3 the other way. I think Hurstead probably has the greater trade value between the two right now. Okay. And we're going to put Povich in there as the big pitching prospect here. Switch this to a two-teamer real quick. Hurstead. Okay. Right now we're about 10 away. More realistically, we're probably more like 12 away here. But this is a pretty good start here. I'm a little bit more impressed by the Poviches and the older starting pitching group that the Orioles have in their minors that they can tap into. McDermott could be used here. I think that the White Sox here would dip more into this group of players. Let's see if we can go with really young talent first, though. Arias we just did in that other trade. Let's say we do Arias again. For it. And Leon. Now let's do Benscombe. Okay. Let's just see what the trade looks like with that so far. 2 starting pitchers, 2 shortstops. Hurstead is the primary piece. Honestly, I think that's too many pieces. We need to consolidate a little bit here and add value. Let's go ahead and take out these 2. We'll leave the starting pitcher. Go to the surplus value. We need around 8 and change. Let's go ahead and do Beavers to the White Sox. And now let's see what we look like. Okay, so there would be the trade here. Crochet in exchange for Hurstead, Povich, Beavers, and Foret. Pretty fair value. Hurstead really does look like an impact player, though, for the Orioles. But getting Crochet as a number 2, number 3 in that rotation might be a better get for them long term because of how good their position player group is already and will continue to be when they get Holiday up there. Okay. Let's go ahead and validate this trade, post it to the trade board, and then we'll get to our finale of what you guys have been waiting for. There we go. Submit. Alrighty. Our grand finale tonight is going to be the perfect trade deadline for the Texas Rangers and the end of season. We'll see how that picture kind of takes shape. We'll be back here in just a moment, kind of stretch our legs for just a moment. In case you guys missed the start of the show, and what we've been doing the last couple weeks anyway is discovering what teams are contenders, what the trades could look like that they do here at the deadline, and then most recently we're seeing what the best trade deadline scenario could be for each contender as we go or get closer to the trade deadline. We'll do some live baseball games here for you in the next couple of days. And then unfortunately, the middle of next week, though, I will be out of town. So I will not be able to do lives for you guys. Instead of doing our lives while I'm out of town, I've got some things I got to take care of with our family anyway. But we'll get that taken care of. But while we do that, I'll still be posting some videos instead of doing these live. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Like I said, we'll be back in just a moment for our grand finale, the Texas Rangers. What does the perfect trade deadline look like for them? We just discussed the Yankees and Orioles. If you guys want to rewind and check that out, we'll be back in just a moment. And welcome back to MLB Hot Stove Daily. In case you guys are just joining us this evening, we just discussed the perfect trade deadline scenarios for both the New York Yankees and Baltimore Orioles. We had previously covered the Seattle Mariners and Houston Astros. Now we wrap up the AL West with the Texas Rangers. Before we do that, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe if you have not already done so. Follow us over on X, formerly known as Twitter, at UpsideSN, and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Appreciate you guys doing so. It really does help us when you do those things for us. So without further ado, let's get into it. First thing I want to do is pull up the Texas Rangers and what their roster looks like right now. I want to look at the 40-man. We're going to look at the Texas Rangers. Teams, Texas Rangers. Roster. Whoop, come on now. Dang pop-ups. There we go. 40-man. Okay, so we're just going to scroll through this one really quick. I want to show you guys where the Rangers are at with their roster because of how much of a roster crunch it's going to be just for them to get onto the active roster, let alone figure out their injured list. And that's before we even get to the trade. So that's why the Rangers, I believe, could do a little bit of buying and selling as long as they keep this hot streak going that they went on before the All-Star break. They went 9-4 in their last 13 games, took 2 out of 3 from the Houston Astros. They're going to have a tough series with the Baltimore Orioles. It is at home. They will be able to set up their rotation however they would like for that series. We'll see what the starters are going to look like, I believe, here in the next 24 to 48 hours if they haven't already posted it. But then they face a couple of teams that they should win some games against. They face the White Sox, they face the Blue Jays, and then they finish up before the trade deadline against the St. Louis Cardinals. All those teams, the Texas Rangers on paper, are better than. The Baltimore Orioles are the one team that I would say they're right there with, and so far this year I would say the Orioles have been better than the Rangers, but the Rangers are up and coming. The Orioles struggled coming into the break. We'll see who comes out a little bit hotter. But looking at the roster of the Rangers right now, you look at where they're at. We'll start at the top. Anderson, Burke, Church, Cornell, all in the minors. All those will probably stay in the minors more than likely when this roster is set for the postseason. Burke being the only one who might crack the postseason roster. Bradford is on the 60-day IL. He will be back at some point. He probably fits best as a long man out of the bullpen, but of course they could trade him at the deadline if somebody sees the value there for Bradford. I don't think the value is there for a trade, so ultimately I think he ends up as a long relief guy out of the bullpen. DeGrom is coming back at the end of August, early September. He probably takes up a rotation spot. Dunning is expected to be back for the first game after the All-Star break. He's going to be on the active roster. Those are 3 pitchers that I just mentioned right there that would normally be on the postseason roster coming back from the injured list. That means 3 guys have to come off of your active roster. We'll keep note of that as we go over to the active roster here in just a moment. Garabito's been in the minors. He's not going to be a factor in the postseason. Jack Leiter's in the minors. He's going to be a factor for next season. Right now, though, he's best served continuing to get that seasoning in the minors. Michael Lorenzen, godsend for the Rangers in the first half of the year. I'm not sure he fits in the rotation after the trade deadline. We'll see what happens. Tyler Mahley's been dominant in the minor league so far as he recovers from his injury. That's another pitcher coming back. That's 4 guys that are on the injured list, pitchers that are going to be coming back. Keep that in mind. Pruitt's on the 60-day IL. He's not going to be a factor in it. Robert just made his major league debut as a 30-year-old relief pitcher. He's one spot on that bullpen right now. You can easily plug in one of those 4. But remember, we'll get to that in just a moment. 4 guys so far coming back from injury. Owen White is in the minors, probably going to finish there in the minors as well. Colt Winn has been great on the Major League roster this year. A little bit of a surprise. Does he fit in the postseason roster, or could they fit him back into the minors? I think more than likely he fits in the minors to end the season. So that kind of still leaves you at 4. You go to the catcher's picture. Sam Huff, he's not going to be promoted. Seems like the Rangers have really given up on his prospect status. Duran is going to be coming back. Count him as a promotion that's going to be coming up. That's 5. That's probably going to be on the active roster once you get to the postseason in all likelihood. Foscue is in the minors right now. Got a little bit of a taste of a debut anyway, but he's a piece that's more attractive anyway in trade than he is to the Rangers on the active roster, unless they move a guy like Duran. But we're still going to leave it at 5 for now. Then you get the Rangers starting third baseman, Josh Young. Make it 6 guys coming back from either injury or having a rehab assignment in the minors or going there for performance issues that are going to be on the Major League roster come postseason time. 6 guys, and we haven't even gotten through the rest of the infield. Ornelas is on the Major League roster. You can plug in him for one, or take him out and plug in one of these guys for Ornelas on that roster right now, but we'll leave it again still at 6 until we finish here. Wenzel's had a cup of coffee in the majors. He's not going to be a factor on the postseason roster. Evan Carter was expected to be on this Major League roster coming into the year. He really struggled, had some back tightness, muscle spasms, and they still seem to be an issue right now. It doesn't seem like there's a clear indication as to when he can return, but it does sound like we're looking at least a few more weeks for him to return. But when he's back and healthy, that's another guy that's expected to be on the Major League roster come postseason time. Dustin Harris, as you see, is in the minors right now. Probably more of an option for next year if he's still on the Rangers club. So that's 7 guys through the outfield anyway that could make a spot on the Major League roster come postseason time. So let's go over to the active roster and just see where the Rangers are at. Do they have 7 spots for the guys that are going to be coming back? Well, Jonathan Hernandez has been up and down out of the bullpen. He could be one guy that's moved in or out. We'll go for now and just leave him in there. Robert, that's one guy that we're going to move out. One guy that we're going to move out obviously doesn't have a long-term spot in that bullpen, short of him, getting his hair on fire or something and just going crazy and not allowing a run the rest of the season. He's not expected to be a part of the postseason picture, at least right now, for the Rangers. So that's one guy that you can easily take off of this roster for the postseason. Jose Urena, coming into the year, I would have said he would have been the odd guy out. He's been great for the Rangers as both a swingman and a spot starter for the Rangers. He's earned his spot on this club. Spore's got the final out in the World Series. Leclerc's been up and down, but he is currently right now the 7th inning guy, occasionally the 8th inning guy when Robertson is unavailable. So we really only have one bullpen arm that they could take out of there. Their catching situation pretty much set right now unless they want to do something with Kisner. I don't think they will. I think they like their mix there. Ornelas, that's 2. That's 2 roster spots now that have been solved through just promotion and demotion here. Ornelas out and bringing up Young, probably the most logical there. Then you get to the outfielders. Derek Hill has been great for the Rangers this year. He's already passed through waivers once, but he does not fit right now, at least with the pieces that are coming back. You look at what they have on their roster, probably Evan Carter takes the spot of a Hill. Then you're looking at a guy like Travis Jankowski. He's on the roster bubble for me. Not because of his speed or anything like that, but because of his inability to perform like he did last year. Love Travis Jankowski, great guy, great interview, great family man, love the player, love the man off the field. But as far as his performance at the plate, it leaves a lot to be desired this year, and he knows that. I think Bruce Bochy would love to keep him on this roster, to keep that speed on the Major League roster. Tavares really struggled in the first half of the year. Derek Hill's emergence a little bit offensively seems to have sparked him to perform a little bit better. Adolis Garcia was terrible at the beginning of the year, and they still can't hit left-handed pitching. So this could be a roster spot that solves one of those issues here at the trade deadline if they decide to go out in the market and bring in a right-handed bat to address some of their needs against left-handed pitching. They really struggle with the high fastball with high velocity. Somebody who can come in right-handed that can handle the high fastball and handle speed might be the piece that they look for here at the deadline. But those are 2 more pieces that they could look to move off of this roster. Jankowski and Hill both would have to go through waivers. I think they'd probably put Jankowski through the injured list. He seems to have something nagging him, and you know how teams usually do this. We've seen the Rangers do this in the past with a guy like Brad Miller, a guy who's just hanging on at the Major League level, but a really good clubhouse guy. Jankowski is a phenomenal clubhouse influence, but he doesn't seem the same. They could say something like a rotator cuff injury, shoulder spasm, something like that, and still keep him in the clubhouse without actually sending him away from the team. So I could see the Rangers doing something like that, putting him on the 60-day IL to free up a 40-man spot as well for some of those guys that are returning. So again, keep those spots in mind. So remember, we had 7 people that were likely to come back and be on this Major League roster. We've only found, 3, 4 spots max for those pieces coming back. Say you go ahead and move Hill. Say you go ahead and move Jankowski. You move Ornelas and you move Robert. That's 4 players off of the Major League active roster for the 7 coming in. That means 3 more are either going to have to stay in the minors, they're going to have to stay on the injured list, or you're going to have to trade one of them. And I think that's probably a combination of those are all of what's going to happen here. You could see Bradford stay in the minors when he gets back healthy as he tries to rehab from injury and try to refine his form. You could see a setback with one of the guys coming back from injury. You never know with DeGrom. Maybe he's not healthy when the time rolls around. Maybe you have another injury before you get to the end of the season. But for right now, they have too many players for too few roster spots, and they're going to have to shuffle this lineup if they don't have any other injury issues over the next couple of weeks. Robert was the other piece out of that bullpen that could be taken out, but they have a number of pitchers that are going to be coming back. Where on this active roster, usually you have 13 or 12 to 14, maybe 15 players max in that bullpen or in that pitching staff on the active roster at any time. Eovaldi's not going anywhere. That's one. Gray, you could move. I'm not going to go ahead and put him in that sets group yet. Heaney, same thing. Hernandez, same thing. Latz has earned his role on this team. That's 2. Leclerc, you're not going to find somebody to take him. That's 3. Lorenzen, I think you could trade him here at the deadline, but I'm going to go ahead and take a roster spot, though, because I think at least 1, probably 2 of Heaney and Lorenzen make it. But we'll go ahead and leave it at, what was it now? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 5 pieces right now we are at in the bullpen, or in this pitching staff. 6 with Robertson, 7 Spores, 8 Scherzer, 9 Urena, 10 Yates. Now remember, let's go back over to our 40-man. You're going to have Maile, that's 11. DeGrom, 12. Bradford could make 13, but Dunning easily makes 13. We'll go ahead and leave that group there. So 13 is where we're at, and that's with trading one of Gray, Heaney, or Lorenzen at the deadline. You look at the position player group, you're bringing in Duran, you're bringing in Young, you're bringing in Carter. That's 3 position players that you're bringing in. Meanwhile, you're moving out Hill to the minors, or through waivers at least. Jankowski, you're moving him moving him probably to the injured list, freeing up a 40-man roster spot. And then Ornelas going out. So you're still going to have a little bit of a roster crunch. Let's go over to the trade chart here and just see what teams or what you guys are saying as far as what the Rangers could do here at the deadline. Well, if the Rangers sell, which is still a possibility, Yates could be a guy that's on the way out. I don't think the Rangers ultimately do sell. We saw comments from Chris Young. You guys can check those out from the beginning of the video where we quoted Joel Sherman in his interview with Chris Young, saying he believes the Rangers will be buyers at the deadline, but everything will be decided over the next couple of weeks. Big series against the Orioles, and then I think they're going to continue their hot streak against teams like the White Sox and Blue Jays. And then the final series before you get to the deadline, you only have one game, and that's with the Cardinals. So big series against the Orioles. They're really going to make or break the rest of the season right here. John Gray, in exchange for a minor leaguer here. Both of these trades make some sense as far as clearing off one of those guys, Lorenzen, Gray, or Heaney, in the name of roster crunch anyway, changing your assets, if you will, moving the pieces around the board, trying to give yourself an advantage somewhere without losing any of that talent. Rangers bring in Ben Rice, Spencer Jones, Nestor Cortez in exchange for, not happening. Adolis Garcia, if they sell, again, I just don't see them selling at this point. Leclerc doesn't have that much trade value, but if the Orioles are desperate for some bullpen help, I suppose. Eovaldi's not going anywhere. Lorenzen, low-level piece coming back. Heaney, low-level piece coming back. This is the one trade that we made the other day. This is the one trade I really like for the Rangers. Lorenzen out, Montgomery in, but it doesn't really solve your issues as far as a roster crunch standpoint. It does solve the issues from a money standpoint, because then the Diamondbacks would be eating the remaining money this season on Montgomery, while you eat the money next season on Montgomery if it doesn't work out. Love that type of a trade. Montgomery is working his way back from injury as well, so you wouldn't have to bring him up immediately. If you have another injury in the rotation, you could easily kind of maneuver things a little bit more. You have some flexibility there. And it just doesn't seem like Lorenzen's a fit on this roster from a postseason rotation perspective. Now, if DeGrom doesn't come back healthy, your one is probably Eovaldi. Your two in a postseason series is probably Scherzer as things stand. Lorenzen has an argument to be their third best pitcher so far this season. Heaney's in that argument as well. Right now, I would say the Rangers would lean more towards Heaney. They love his stuff in a postseason series. Game 4, they would probably throw John Gray, and so Lorenzen, fifth starter, and that's without bringing back Maile or DeGrom into that rotation. I think the writing's on the wall. He's on the way out. Dunning could be on the way out as well to free up some roster flexibility as well. As far as a target that the Rangers could acquire, let's see if anybody has any targets for them. Minor league prospect from the Orioles, if they sell, again, a lot of selling trades, a lot of other fan bases trying to take pieces from the Rangers here. Don't like this trade at all for the Rangers. They lose Lowe, bring in France and a prospect. No thank you. Losing Eovaldi, losing Lowe, losing Robertson, all a whole bunch of selling transactions. I don't see not too many that are buying here. Trading Brock Porter and Jack Leiter, that's not happening for Mark Leiter Jr. Eovaldi out, not happening. Tyler Anderson would be a buy type of a move. They're not trading Kumar Rocker. He doesn't have that value because of the injury issues either. Not happening. I don't see anything from y'all. None of these trades really make any sense. This was another trade we made. Getting a couple of reliever, starting pitcher types in for pieces that don't necessarily fit the window of the Rangers. Foscue doesn't really have a role on this team. Duran, probably more of a bench piece right now unless Lowe doesn't perform, and then Duran probably fits in there at first base. Huff, they've really grown away from. They don't want to really give it an opportunity at the major league level to be their backup catcher. They move him on to the Marlins, where hopefully he can catch a little bit of fire. They need offense there. All three of those guys are offense-first players. And so in a team that needs offense, they have lots of pitching that's going to be coming back even next year. Love that trade return for the Marlins. We'll do third page here and just kind of check a couple of other options. Okay. Don't really see any buying options, so we're going to go over to the Major League stats here. All teams. We want to go with, I wonder if we can select a split. When they're batting right, yes. We want a right-handed hitter. And let's just take a look and see who the home run leaders are. Actually, let's look at OPS. I like OPS as far as a stat better than just a home run number. Any of these guys that might be on the market. Profar, if the Padres were doing terribly, they're not. Rooker, probably the best one here. I don't really see any of these pieces being traded, though. Paredes, probably the most available, quote-unquote one, but again, his value is redonkulously high, and the Rangers already have a couple of third basemen. They're not going to want a third. Perez is a backup catcher. If the Royals, if he tells the Royals he wants out, he will get moved, but I don't see that happening. Guerrero, probably the biggest option here. They could move Lowe in return as well. Kind of like the one-for-one idea there. Maybe a low-level prospect going back. They do have some experience with the Guerrero family. Let's just see what it would look like. Just out of pure curiosity, if the Rangers decided to add a big-time bat. I thought Pete Alonso before the season would have been a great fit for the Rangers. Yandy Diaz is still on my list as far as a player I would keep my eyes on if I'm a Rangers fan. Blue Jays is who we were looking for here. I just want to look at Vlad Guerrero Jr.'s value right now. Alrighty. $38 million. The biggest issue for the Rangers is that they're going to have to eat a lot of that money that's left on this year's deal. Rangers are right up against it as far as the tax, and they do not want to go over. That's part of the reason why they waited so long on Montgomery to where he went to the Diamondbacks, and why they waited so long on Lorenzen, only gave him $3 million. They are literally right up against it, so they're going to have to pretty much get the Blue Jays to eat the entirety of the remaining money on Guerrero's deal. You look at where this money's at right now, that means the Blue Jays would have to eat roughly $14 million. That means you're getting a prospect around 20 back. Rangers did something similar with Scherzer last year. Let's look at the Rangers side of things if they did that. Prospect around 20 that they would be willing to move. I don't think they'd ever move off of Walcott right now. He looks like a superstar in the making. They could possibly move a Jack Leiter. That might be a piece that appeals, and then kind of fill this one out with maybe Duran just to finish off the trade. It's not bad, actually. Leiter to the Blue Jays, along with Duran. 2 people off of the 40-man, solve some of your roster crunch number issues while you bring in Vlad Guerrero Jr. Blue Jays end up paying roughly 14, is what I think we said, going to the Rangers to pay for Guerrero's remaining money on this year's deal. What do you guys think of something like that? I think the Rangers would still have to add probably one more piece if the Blue Jays were to send that much money. We're talking a low-level piece, though. We're talking about probably a guy like, I don't think they would ever move Brock Porter. Jake Latz out of the bullpen, no. Church has been good, but I don't think there's really a role for him on this team. He is on the 40-man, would solve some roster crunch issues even further. Harris probably has the best value. He's in the top 10 for the Rangers, I believe, as far as prospects. He's 25, though. You might want to go a little younger. Let's say we go with Church here. Mainly because it frees up another roster spot for the Rangers. I kind of like this one. I'm not saying I would do it if I'm the Rangers, but this would be a type of trade where they get the team to eat all the money, much like we did with the Montgomery one. You free up some roster spots as well, to where people are coming back healthy. You don't have to release anybody for nothing. So basically, you're bringing on one player to your 40-man, one onto your 25 anyway, in Guerrero. You're getting rid of 3 guys off of your current roster, off of your 40-man, but you still have a roster crunch issue, and now you've displaced Nathaniel Lowe. Do you spin Nathaniel Lowe to another team that needs a first baseman? Looking at you, Houston. Do you spin him off to the Mariners? There's a lot of different options, but this trade would at least be a bat that could solve them some right-handed power issues. Is it a perfect trade? By any means, no, but it could be one that helps out. Let's kind of continue this, just a little bit of a deep dive here, just to see if there's anybody else that catches our eye in the top 50. Connor Joe there with a 720 OPS, not really that high, but among qualifiers at least. India, Hernandez, Ohapi, Contreras, Santander, Raleigh. Ian Happ makes some sense. 4 homers, 247 average, 779 OPS. Let's go to all players real quick. And I want to look at some of these that have higher at bats that may not have qualified here. Rengifo is one of those guys. 380 average. Brent Rooker did qualify. Not sure he would have a role on this team, though. Elio Ramirez, or Ramos anyway, from the Giants, was an all-star. I don't see any missed opportunities, at least yet, anyway. Eric Haas for the Brewers is having a great year. Wow, that's impressive. 5 games, though. Mike Trout. Ain't no way the Rangers would be able to get him, even if they wanted him. And this is probably the end of the list here, is just this page here. Let's see if there's anybody else who might catch our eye. Boat, JD Martinez, Robert. Again, I think there's other teams that are going to be in his market that are better for him. Rangers are more looking for some bargains on the market if they decide to add here at the deadline rather than just go with what the options they have in-house. Pete Alonso would be a great option before the season. I still think he would be, but I don't think they're moving him. Pilar might be a nice outfield option to kind of replace a guy like Jankowski for the Rangers. Toro for the Oakland A's. He is .304 average, not bad. He's never really proven to be a consistent major league player, though, when he's given extended time. He'd be a bit player for the Rangers at best. He's not playing over Smith. He's not playing over Young. His best case to play might be over Nathaniel Lowe. Ian Happ, again, is just the only one that really looks possible here. Position flexibility makes some sense. All right, let's look at Ian Happ. Left fielder by trade now at 29. They already have Carter and Langford who can play left. Langford can play center, though, in a pinch. He is that fast. He's pretty good at covering those spots. Looking at his numbers last year, 248 average. He's continued a downward trend as far as that goes. On base percentage, 360 last year, though, so that was good. Second highest in his career. He's 352, so he's still getting on base at a pretty good clip. I like that. OPS 0.81 right now. Is he a switch hitter? Yes, he's a switch hitter too. And he holds his own from the right-handed side, which is what I like here. Rangers do get a little left-handed heavy at times. Okay, this is a decent option here. Let's go ahead and clear the trade. We're going to look at the Rangers again, obviously. I'm just trying to build a trade besides the Montgomery one that the Rangers could do that would help them out. This one is the harder one to do because they need bullpen. They need to solve this roster crunch issue as well. But then if they can add a right-handed hitter who can handle the fastball, that's really the only other weakness offensively on this team that they have. Their offense hasn't been great so far this year, but I am seeing a lot of progression from a lot of guys who were struggling early. Seager, Semien struggled at times. Garcia, those are the kind of the 3 big hitters in this lineup, and all 3 of them are struggling. Langford was expected to come out like a house of fire, and he really didn't out of the box. He's looking significantly better. Young looked great in the first 4 games of the season, then got hurt. Josh Smith was an afterthought on this roster before the season. Now he's their best player, at least so far in the first half of the year. I think we all know Corey Seager's going to overtake that mantle before the end of the season. But it's been an interesting year offensively for Texas at the very least. A guy like Ian Happ, I think, would solve some issues for them in the outfield. Depth-wise, consistency, all those kinds of things. Brings a lot of what Robbie Grossman brings to the plate here as well. I wonder if this would be the piece that replaces Robbie Grossman, who they acquired earlier this offseason, or earlier this season anyway, from the Chicago White Sox. He was on their championship team last year. But again, let's look at this trade here. We're looking at Ian Happ, 9.7, going to the Rangers. 2 years left after this year as well. Like that if you're Texas. $46 million left on his deal as of right now. That means you're roughly looking at, let's see, $7, $8, $9 million right now. We'll call it 9 just to be safe for Ian Happ. So let's go ahead and throw $9 million, because remember, Texas can't take on money. They are not willing to go into the tax. Going to the Rangers. Add the cash. Okay. Now, the one piece that the Cubs could use is some starting pitching. It's been a rough go for them. Yamanaga's been good for them. Steele's been good for them. But they really need to beef up this rotation a little bit. They have some options at the upper levels of the minors right now, but all of them are aging prospects, if you will. Nobody with any real juice. Nobody with settled that has settled themselves at the major league level. So looking over at the Rangers, remember how I talked about Dane Dunning? We're going to start there. I just want to see where he is at. Look at his value, 0.9. Ouch. He ain't going to get you much, and for a prospect that's going to give you 8, or for a piece that's going to give you 18 with the money you're bringing in, you'd like to get more in trade for Dane Dunning. I don't think you're going to get it, but okay. Forget that for now. Let's go back to our value. We need around 18, 19, 20. Leiter could be the piece there. They already have the cousin there already on the roster. They need some starting pitching. Leiter could be the piece that does it. I don't mind that deal. Duran would be the kind of equivalent piece here to Happ going the other way. So let's go ahead and put Duran in this deal. I'm going to put Leiter in here. Very similar trade to what we just did for Vlad Guerrero Jr. What do you guys think of this one? Ian Happ, cash, going from the Cubs to the Rangers for Duran and Leiter. Hate to give up on both of those players because I do think Duran has a chance to be better than Ian Happ already. I think Duran, when he's given consistent playing time, is a significant piece on a roster. I just don't see a way that he plays every day. Meanwhile, Ian Happ, I think, has a clearer path to playing time, possibly with Leody Taveras partnering there in center. You can play Ian Happ at first when Lowe can't hit against lefties. I think he could handle first base. Or at least have Josh Smith handle first base. He's able to flex all over the diamond as well. How often would Ian Happ play in, say, a week? Best case scenario, you're probably looking 5-6 games. Best case, more realistic, probably 3 to 4. Is 3 to 4 days a week from Ian Happ this year, plus whatever you get from him next year and the year after, worth it to give up on the former number 2 pick in the draft, the guy you'd hoped would be in your starting rotation for the next decade in Jack Leiter, what you originally thought was the best piece in the Joey Gallo trade in Ezekiel Duran, now Josh Smith, is it worth giving up that in exchange for 2.5 years of Ian Happ? Because of the right-handed issues and the roster crunch would be the only reason I would consider it. But other than that, I'm not sure I would do that either. So I'm going to go ahead and scrap the trade. We're going to go ahead and clear it out. And for those of you that are Rangers fans and you're wondering, hey, you said off the top that this was going to be what the perfect trade deadline would look like for the Texas Rangers. Well, the perfect trade deadline, at least with that scenario, would be holding on to Duran and Leiter. I don't see Ian Happ being worth either of those two guys, at least to the Texas Rangers. Now to the Chicago Cubs, that might seem a little light. That might seem a little heavy. They might not be willing to eat the $9 million, whatever the case may be. But I don't think there's a trade happening between the two teams around Ian Happ. I think he'd be a great piece this year. He was the only one I really saw out of the top 75 players from the right-handed side that could make a difference for what the Rangers are looking for this year. Brent Rooker is the other one, but I don't think he fits on this roster either. So, As far as what that means for the Rangers, they have, like I said, 7 guys coming back from the injured list. You're hoping for a nice rebound candidacy from Evan Carter. You're hoping Josh Young comes back and is just as good as he was early on in the season as he returns from a broken wrist. And then you got several pitchers coming back as well. Now, that does not mean I think the Rangers won't make a move. I do think they're going to have a roster crunch, and I think they're going to have to trade off of this Major League roster. You look at Dane Dunning, we just saw his trade value at 0.9. Say the Rangers have already accounted for the money that they're spending to Dane Dunning in their luxury tax calculations. If they wanted to eat the remainder of his contract to boost up the return that they could get for him, they could do something like that. But I think more realistically, they hold on to Dane Dunning at least through the trade deadline and into the offseason, where starting pitching is going to be at a premium once again. You can get all 29 other clubs in there to try to bid on Dane Dunning's services. They don't seem to want to use him in the postseason, but I think out of the bullpen, they might be forced to in a 7-game series. So they'll hold on to Dane Dunning. The one piece, like I mentioned off the top, that they could move and more likely will when this roster crunch happens is Michael Lorenzen. Moving him on and possibly Andrew Heaney being the other one. They just really like the stuff of an Andrew Heaney. Gray's had some up and down performances, as has Heaney, but the Rangers seem to really value Andrew Heaney's the pitches that he utilizes, the spin, all those types of things. They really value that in their postseason, calculations. Remember last year when Dane Dunning was the better pitcher in the second half of the year, especially in August and September, and instead of getting him a start in the postseason, they went with Andrew Heaney time and time again, and he only got through 3-4 innings, but the stuff really played up in a shorter sample size. They took him out after 3 or 4 innings, then went to their bullpen, and then I kind of piggybacked from there. I think we could see something very similar. But you look at the top 1, 2, 3 in this rotation when healthy, DeGrom, Scherzer, Eovaldi, possibly Maile as the 4. There's really not that much room for anybody else. Gray, Heaney, Lorenzen, Dunning, Bradford, all guys who have been capable of starting this year for the Rangers are not going to be starting in the postseason for them if those other guys are healthy. So something to kind of keep in mind, that they will still make some moves here at the deadline. So what would the perfect trade deadline look like? I mentioned the Lorenzen to the Diamondbacks in exchange for Montgomery. Something like that could be a nice piece for them to move. If they decide to move Lorenzen for a bullpen arm, I think that would probably be the best case scenario for them, because they need to add bullpen arms. If in the offseason they want to eat take on the contract of Jordan Montgomery once again, see if they can revitalize him, and see if he gets back with Mike Maddox and solves the issues that he's found in Arizona, hey, that'd be great. But right now, they're a little bit of a crunch as far as roster. They're a little bit of a crunch anyway as far as the luxury tax. And so those are kind of the impediments to some of these bigger trades that the Rangers could make. On local sports talk radio here in East Texas anyway, we get a lot of Rangers talk anyway. Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News was speaking with one of the local sports radio hosts anyway, talking about how the Rangers are really cognizant of both where they are in the standings. They're cognizant of the luxury tax and how close they are up against it and how much they don't want to spend into the tax, at least right now. And then they also realize that they're also still 5 games back in the division, and this thing could turn in a heartbeat if they lose. Say they get swept at home by the Orioles, and then they drop a couple of games to one of these lowly teams like the Blue Jays or the White Sox. Then they might have to turn around and sell here at the deadline. I don't think that's likely. I think that's kind of the worst case scenario, which I think is almost a 0% chance. But there's a lot of iron still in the fire for the Rangers. And I do think we will see some moves. So best case scenario right now is the guys get healthy and stay healthy. That's the best case scenario for the Texas Rangers. And then maybe they add a bench bat to kind of help with their right-handed hitting against lefties. They thought Robbie Grossman would help them with that, and he has to a certain extent. But they need more. They need better production. Nate Lowe is one of those guys that started to turn things around. A number of guys on this team have started to. But getting guys back like Young and Carter should also help with some of those issues. I think Young specifically would really help against left-handed pitching. He looks like the closest guy back, at least from the offensive side of things. Dunning is due back on Friday as well when they play against the Orioles, so they should start to get some pitching reinforcements here shortly. Maile's probably a week or two away, probably right at the trade deadline. We could see Maile back on the big league roster. So appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe if you have not already. We'll be live for you guys again late tomorrow night, probably around the 9:30 hour Central Time. Be sure to join us then. Make sure to follow us over on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Appreciate y'all, and y'all have a great evening.